Laws, Chapter 7. The Ethics of Citizenship.
And now, assuming children of both sexes to have been born, it will be appropriate for us to consider, next, their upbringing and education. This cannot be completely ignored but may be seen as a subject more suited to advice and guidance rather than legislation. In private life, there are many small things, not always obvious, that arise from the pleasures, pains, and desires of individuals, which go against the intentions of the legislator and make the characters of the citizens diverse and dissimilar. This is a problem in states, because due to their smallness and frequency, it would be inappropriate and improper to make them punishable by law. And if they were made punishable, they would undermine the written law because people would develop a habit of frequently breaking the law in small matters. As a result, you cannot legislate about them, and it is even more impossible to remain silent. I am speaking obscurely, but I will also try to clarify my points, as I acknowledge that there is currently a lack of clarity in what I am saying.
Very true.
Am I not correct in asserting that a good education is one that contributes most to the improvement of the mind and body?
Undoubtedly.
And nothing can be clearer than the fact that the most beautiful bodies are those that grow up from infancy in the best and straightest manner?
Certainly.
And do we not also observe that the initial growth of every living thing is by far the greatest and fullest? Many would even argue that a person at 25 does not reach twice the height they attained at 5.
True.
Well, isn't rapid growth without proper and abundant exercise the source of endless problems in the body?
Yes.
And the body should have the most exercise when it receives the most nourishment?
But, stranger, are we supposed to impose this great amount of exercise on newly born infants?
No, rather on the bodies of infants still in the womb.
What do you mean, my good sir? During the process of gestation?
Exactly. I am not surprised that you have never heard of this very peculiar type of exercise applied to such little creatures, which, although strange, I will try to explain to you.
By all means.
The practice is easier for us to understand than for you, due to certain activities that are carried to excess in Athens. Not only boys, but often older individuals, have the habit of keeping quails and roosters, which they train to fight each other. And they do not believe that the fights they incite between them provide sufficient exercise. In addition to this, they carry them tucked under their armpits, holding the smaller birds in their hands and the larger ones under their arms, and go for walks of many miles for the sake of health. Not their own health, but the health of the birds. This proves to any intelligent person that all bodies benefit from shaking and movement when they are moved without fatigue, whether the motion comes from themselves or is caused by a swing, or on a boat, or on horseback, or by other moving bodies in any way. By gaining control over food and drink in this way, they can impart beauty, health, and strength. But even if we accept all this, what follows? Shall we make a ridiculous law that pregnant women should walk about and shape the embryo within them as we shape wax before it hardens, and after birth swaddle the infant for 2 years? Suppose we compel nurses, under penalty of a legal fine, to always carry the children somewhere, either to the temples, or to the countryside, or to their relatives' houses, until they are able to stand well, and to ensure that their limbs are not distorted by leaning on them when they are too young. They should continue to carry them until the child has completed its 3rd year, and there should be strong nurses, and more than one of them. Shall these be our rules, and shall we impose a penalty for neglecting them? No, no, the penalty we were talking about will fall upon us more than enough.
What penalty?
Ridicule, and the difficulty of getting the feminine and servant-like dispositions of the nurses to comply.
Then why was there any need to mention the matter at all?
The reason is that masters and freemen in states, when they hear of it, are likely to come to the true conviction that without proper regulation of private life in cities, stability in the establishment of laws is hardly to be expected. And someone who makes this reflection may adopt the laws mentioned earlier and, by adopting them, may govern their household and state well and be happy.
Quite likely.
Therefore, let us continue with our legislation until we have determined the exercises that are suitable for the souls of young children, in the same way we have started going through the rules concerning their bodies.
By all means.
Let us assume, then, as a first principle regarding both the body and soul of incredibly young creatures, that nursing and movement throughout the day and night is beneficial for all of them, and the younger they are, the more they will need it. Infants should live, if possible, as if they were always rocking at sea. This is the lesson we can learn from the experience of nurses, as well as from the use of motion as a remedy in the rituals of the caravans. When mothers want their restless children to fall asleep, they do not use rest, but instead motion. They rock them in their arms. They do not provide silence, but sing to them and lull them with sweet melodies. Similarly, the Bakshik women are cured of their frenzy through dance and music.
Well, stranger, what is the reason for this?
The reason is clear.
What is it?
The affection of both the Bacchantes and the children is a result of fear, which arises from a negative state of the soul. When external agitation is applied to these emotions, the external motion overpowers the internal one, resulting in peace and calmness in the soul. This quiets the restless heartbeat, allowing the children to sleep and causing the Bacchantes to dance to the pipe with the help of the gods. It also produces a sound mind, replacing their frenzy. In short, there are many benefits to this treatment.
Certainly.
However, if fear has such power, we can conclude that a soul that has been familiar with fear from a young age will become more prone to fear. It is widely accepted that this leads to the development of cowardice rather than courage.
No doubt.
On the other hand, the habit of overcoming fears and terrors from a young age can be seen as an exercise of courage.
True.
We can say that engaging in physical activity and exercise in the early years of life contributes to the development of virtue in the soul.
Absolutely true.
Furthermore, a cheerful or gloomy temperament can influence one's courage or cowardice.
Indeed.
Now, we must discuss how we can easily instill either character in the young.
Certainly.
It is commonly believed that luxury makes young people discontented, irritable, and easily agitated by trivial matters. On the other hand, excessive and harsh servitude makes people mean, submissive, and hateful towards others, making them undesirable companions.
But how should the state educate those who do not yet understand the language of the country and are therefore unable to appreciate any form of instruction?
I will tell you how. Every newborn animal, especially humans, utters cries. Nurses use these signs to understand what an infant desires. If the infant remains silent when something is brought to them, it is assumed that they are pleased. However, if they cry and wail, it indicates their displeasure. This period, which lasts for about 3 years, is a significant portion of one's life that can be spent either well or poorly.
True.
Does it not seem to you that a discontented and ungracious nature is filled with lamentations and sorrows more than a good person should be?
Certainly.
Well, if we were to ensure that our young children experience as little sorrow, fear, and pain as possible during these 3 years, could we not expect to make their souls more gentle and cheerful?
Indeed, stranger, especially if we could provide them with various pleasures.
I cannot agree with you there, Cleinias. It would be their utter ruin to raise them in such a manner. The beginning is always the most critical part of education. Let us see if I am correct.
Please continue.
The point on which we disagree is of great importance. I hope that you, McGillis, can help us decide. I argue that a truly virtuous life should neither seek pleasures nor completely avoid pain. It should embrace a middle ground, which I previously described as gentle and benevolent. This state is rightly attributed to God. Therefore, anyone who wishes to be divine should strive for this balanced state. They should not recklessly pursue pleasures, as they will not be free from pain. We should not allow anyone, young or old, male or female, including newborn infants, to be given excessive pleasures. This is especially important during infancy, as habits are deeply ingrained during this time. Furthermore, if I may add, a pregnant woman should be carefully tended to and protected from intense pleasures and pains. She should cultivate gentleness, benevolence, and kindness during this time.
Stranger, you need not ask McGillis who has spoken the truth. I agree that all people should avoid a life of extreme pain or pleasure and always strive for a middle ground. You have given a good answer.
Very well, Cleinias. Now, let the three of us consider another point.
What is it?
All the matters we have been discussing are commonly referred to as unwritten customs. The laws of our ancestors are of a similar nature. We cannot call these things laws, nor can we leave them unmentioned. They are the foundation of the entire state and serve as a bridge between the existing written laws and those that will be established in the future. These ancestral customs, if properly ordered and made habitual, protect and preserve the existing written laws. However, if they deviate from what is right and fall into disorder, they become like the supports of a building that slip out of place and cause universal ruin. One part drags down another, and the beautiful structure collapses because the old foundations have been undermined. Reflecting on this, Cleinias, you should strive to unite the new state in every possible way, not neglecting any aspect, whether it be laws, customs, or activities. It is through these means that a city is bound together, and all these elements are only enduring when they depend on one another. Therefore, it should not surprise us if we find that many trivial customs or practices are incorporated into our laws.
That is absolutely true. We agree with you.
Until the age of 3, whether it is a boy or a girl, if someone strictly follows our previous regulations and makes them a primary focus, they will do much for the benefit of the young ones. However, at the ages of 3, 4, 5, and even 6, children's nature requires play. This is the time to eliminate their self-will, punishing them without shaming them. We previously discussed how we should not add insult to punishment when dealing with slaves, so as not to anger them, nor should we leave them unpunished, as it may make them rebellious. The same principle applies to freeborn children. At this age, children have certain natural ways of amusing themselves, which they discover when they interact with others. All children between the ages of 3 and 6 should gather at the temples in the villages, with the families of each village coming together in one place. The nurses should ensure that the children behave properly and orderly. They and their groups should be under the supervision of 12 matrons, one for each group. These matrons are chosen annually by the women who have authority over marriage, as appointed by the guardians of the law. These matrons should be selected by the women who have authority over marriage, one from each tribe. They should all be of the same age. As soon as they are appointed, they should assume their positions and go to the temples every day. They should punish any offenders, whether male or female, who are slaves or strangers, with the help of some of the public slaves. If any citizen disputes the punishment, the matron should bring them before the wardens of the city. If there is no dispute, she should punish them herself. After the age of 6, it is time to separate the sexes. Boys should live with boys, and girls should live with girls. Now they must begin to learn. Boys should go to teachers who will instruct them in horsemanship, archery, javelin throwing, and slinging. Girls, if they do not object, should also learn these skills, at least until they know how to handle these weapons, especially heavy arms. I must note that the current practice is widely misunderstood.
In what way?
It is believed that the right and left hand are naturally suited for different uses, while there is no difference in the use of the feet and lower limbs. However, in the use of the hands, we are, in a sense, handicapped by the foolishness of nurses and mothers. Although our limbs are naturally balanced, we create a difference in them through bad habits. In some cases, this does not matter, such as when we hold the lyre in the left hand and the plectrum in the right. But it is foolish to make the same distinction in other cases. The customs of the Scythians prove our error. They not only hold the bow with their left hand and draw the arrow with their right, but they use either hand for both purposes. There are many similar examples in charioteering and other activities, which show that those who weaken the left side act against nature. In the case of the plectrum and similar instruments made of horn, as I mentioned before, it does not matter. But it makes a significant difference and can be especially important for a warrior who has to use iron weapons, bows, javelins, and the like. Especially when fighting in heavy armor against opponents in heavy armor. There is a great difference between someone who has learned and someone who has not, and between someone who has been trained in physical exercises and someone who has not. Just as someone who is skilled in the pancratium, boxing, or wrestling can fight from their left side without difficulty and does not stumble or become confused when their opponent forces them to change positions, the same applies to heavy-armed fighting and other activities, if I am not mistaken. Someone who possesses these dual powers of attack and defense should not leave them unused or untrained in any case if they can help it. Even if a person had the strength of Geryon or Briareus, they should be able to throw 100 darts with their 100 hands. Now, the male and female magistrates should oversee all these matters. The women should supervise the nursing and amusements of the children, while the men should oversee their education. This way, all the children, boys and girls alike, will have strong hands and feet. They will not, if they can help it, ruin the gifts of nature through bad habits. Education has two branches: gymnastics, which concerns the body, and music, which is intended for the improvement of the soul. Gymnastics also has two branches: dancing and wrestling. One form of dancing imitates musical recitation and aims to preserve dignity and freedom. The other form aims to promote health, agility, and beauty in the limbs and body parts. It gives the proper flexion and extension to each of them, spreading harmonious motion throughout, which serves as a suitable accompaniment to the dance. Regarding wrestling, the techniques devised by Antaeus and Circean in their systems out of a vain spirit of competition, or the techniques of boxing invented by Hippias or Amycus, are useless and unsuitable for war. They do not deserve much attention. However, the art of wrestling that focuses on maintaining the freedom of the neck, hands, and sides, working with energy and constancy, with composed strength for the sake of health, is always useful and should not be neglected. This should be taught to both experts and students when discussing legislation. Experts should freely provide instructions, and students should receive them gratefully. Furthermore, it is important to include appropriate imitations of war in our choruses. In Crete, there are armed dances performed by the Cuorites, and the Lacedaemonians have similar dances performed by the Dioscuri. Our Virgin Lady, who enjoys dancing, believes it is not fitting to dance with empty hands. She must be dressed in a complete suit of armor and perform the dance in this attire. Young men and women should imitate her in every way, valuing the favor of the goddess for both war and festive occasions. It is also appropriate for boys, until they go out to war, to participate in processions and supplications to all the gods, dressed in a dignified manner, armed and on horseback, engaging in dances and marches, fast or slow, offering prayers to the gods and the sons of gods. They should also participate in contests and preludes to contests, if at all, with these objectives in mind. These types of exercises, and no others, are useful in both peace and war, benefiting both states and private households. Other labors, sports, and physical exercises are unworthy of free men. Now, I have fully described the type of gymnastics that I initially mentioned. If you know of any better ones, please share your thoughts.
It is not easy, stranger, to set aside these principles of gymnastics and wrestling and propose better ones.
Now, let us discuss what still needs to be said about the gifts of the Muses and Apollo. Before, we thought we had covered everything and that only gymnastics remained. However, we now realize what points have been omitted and should be addressed first. Let us proceed to discuss them.
Certainly.
Let me reiterate, even though I have said it before, that caution must always be exercised by both the speaker and the listener when dealing with something very unique and unusual. My story is one that many would be afraid to tell, but I have the confidence to continue.
What do you have to say, stranger?
I say that in general, no one has noticed that the plays of childhood have a significant impact on the stability or instability of legislation in states. When plays are organized in a way that children have the same games, amuse themselves in the same manner, and find delight in the same toys, the more serious institutions of the state remain undisturbed. However, if sports are disrupted, innovations are made, and they constantly change, and the young no longer have the same preferences or established notions of good and bad taste in their physical appearance or clothing, but instead honor those who come up with something new and unconventional in figures and colors, then we can truly say that no greater harm can befall a state. Changing the sport secretly changes the manners of the young, dishonoring the old and honoring the new. I affirm that there is nothing that is more detrimental to all states than thinking or saying such things. Shall I explain how great I consider this evil to be?
Are you referring to the evil of criticizing antiquity in states?
Exactly.
If that is what you are talking about, you will find us to be listeners who are disposed to receive what you say not unfavorably, but most favorably.
I would expect so.
Please continue.
Well, let us pay even greater attention to each other's words. The argument asserts that any change, except for evil, is the most dangerous of all things. This holds true for the seasons, the winds, the management of our bodies, and the habits of our minds. It is true for all things except, as I mentioned before, for the bad. If we observe individuals who are accustomed to eating any kind of meat, drinking any kind of drink, or doing any kind of work they can find, we can see that initially, it disrupts their bodies. However, as time goes on, their bodies adapt, and they learn to appreciate variety. They have good health and enjoy life. If they are then confined to a superior diet, they initially experience disorders and have difficulty adjusting to their new food. We can imagine a similar principle applying to the minds of men and the nature of their souls. When they have been raised under certain laws that have remained unchanged for long periods of time, so that no one has any memory or tradition of them being any different, then everyone is afraid and ashamed to change what is established. The legislator must find a way to instill this reverence for antiquity. I propose the following method. People tend to think, as I mentioned before, that when children's games are altered, they are just games, not realizing that serious and detrimental consequences arise from these changes. They readily comply with the child's wishes instead of discouraging them. They fail to consider that these children who innovate in their games will grow up to be different from the previous generation of children. Being different, they will desire a different kind of life and, under the influence of this desire, will want different institutions and laws. None of them reflects the fact that this will lead to the greatest harm to states. Changes in physical fashion are not serious problems, but frequent changes in the praise and criticism of behavior are the greatest problems and require careful consideration.
Certainly.
And do we still hold to our previous assertion that rhythms and music in general are imitations of good and bad character traits in people? What do you say?
That is the only belief we can accept.
Should we not, then, make every effort to prevent our youth from desiring to imitate new styles in dance or song? And should we not prevent anyone from offering them various pleasures?
Absolutely true.
Can any of us imagine a better way to achieve this than the method used by the Egyptians?
What is their method?
They consecrate every type of dance or melody. First, we should establish festivals, determining what they should be, when they should take place, and which gods, demigods, and heroes they should honor. Then, we should determine which hymns should be sung at each sacrifice and which dances should be performed at each festival. Initially, this should be arranged by certain individuals. Once arranged, the entire assembly of citizens should offer sacrifices and libations to the Fates and all other gods and consecrate the various odes to gods and heroes. If anyone offers any other hymns or dances to any of the gods, the priests and priestesses, in collaboration with the guardians of the law, should exclude them. If the person refuses to comply, they should be subject to a lifelong charge of impiety brought against them by anyone who wishes.
Very good.
In considering this matter, let us remember what is due to ourselves.
What do you mean?
I mean that when a young man, or even an old one, encounters something strange or unfamiliar, they do not immediately embrace it as truth. Instead, they pause and consider, like someone at a crossroads who is unsure of which path to take. They may be alone or with others, and they will ask themselves and their companions, which way should we go? They will not move forward until they are confident they are going in the right direction. And this is what we must do now. A strange discussion about the nature of law has arisen, which requires careful consideration. At our age, we should not be too quick to speak about such important matters or be confident that we can say anything certain in an instant.
Very true.
Therefore, let us allow time for reflection and decide once we have given the subject sufficient consideration. But so that we are not hindered from completing the natural arrangement of our laws, let us continue with the conclusion of them in the proper order. If it is God's will, the exposition of the completed laws will shed light on our current perplexity.
Excellent, stranger. Let us do as you suggest.
Let us then affirm the paradox that strains of music are our laws, nomoi. The ancients referred to lyric songs by this name, so they would not have objected to our proposed use of the word. Someone, whether asleep or awake, must have had a vague understanding of their nature. Let our decree be as follows: no one, in singing or dancing, shall violate public and consecrated models or the general fashion among the youth, just as they would not violate any other law. Those who observe this law shall be blameless, but those who disobey, as I mentioned earlier, shall be punished by the guardians of the laws, as well as by the priests and priestesses. Let us imagine this to be our law.
Very good.
Can anyone who makes such laws avoid ridicule? Let us see. Our only safety lies in first establishing certain models for composers. One of these models shall be as follows: if, during a sacrifice when the victims are being burned according to the law, someone who may be a son or brother stands next to another person at the altar and over the victims and utters horribly blasphemous words, won't his words inspire despair and bad omens in the minds of his father and other relatives?
Of course.
And this is what happens in all our cities. A magistrate offers a public sacrifice, and many choruses come in and position themselves a short distance from the altar. From time to time, they pour forth all sorts of horrible blasphemies against the sacred rites, using words, rhythms, and melodies that are most sorrowful to hear. The one who makes the citizens weep the most now when the city is offering sacrifice is declared the winner. Shouldn't we forbid such strains as these? And if our citizens must hear such lamentations, then on some cursed and inauspicious day, let there be choruses of foreign and hired minstrels, like those hired to accompany the deceased at funerals with barbarous carrion chants. That is the type of thing that would be appropriate if we have such strains at all. And let the attire of the singers be the opposite of circlets and gold ornaments. Enough of all this. I will simply ask once more whether we should establish as one of our principles of song
What?
that we should avoid any words of bad omen. Let songs of good omen be heard everywhere and always in our state. I need not ask again, but I will assume that you agree with me.
By all means, that law is approved by all of us.
But what should be our next musical law or type? Shouldn't we offer prayers to the gods when we make sacrifices?
Certainly.
And our third law, if I am not mistaken, will be that our poets, understanding prayers as requests we make to the gods, should be careful not to mistakenly ask for evil instead of good. Making such a prayer would be ridiculous.
Very true.
Weren't we recently convinced that no silver or golden wealth should exist in our state?
Indeed.
And what was the purpose of our argument? Didn't we imply that poets are not always capable of knowing what is good or evil? And if one of them utters a mistaken prayer in song or words, they will make our citizens pray for the opposite of what is good in matters of the highest importance. This would be a great mistake, as I was saying. Should we then propose as one of our laws and models relating to the muses?
What? Will you explain the law more precisely?
Should we make a law that the poet shall not compose anything contrary to the ideas of what is lawful, or just, or beautiful, or good, which are allowed in the state? And should they not be allowed to share their compositions with any private individuals until they have shown them to the appointed judges and the guardians of the law, and they are satisfied with them? As for the people we appoint as our legislators about music and the director of education, they have already been indicated. Once again, as I have asked more than once, should this be our third law, and type, and model? What do you say?
Let it be so.
Then it will be appropriate to have hymns and praises of the gods, mixed with prayers. And after the gods, prayers and praises should be offered in the same way to demigods and heroes, suitable to their respective characters.
Certainly.
Next, there will be no objection to a law that citizens who have passed away and have done good and energetic deeds either with their souls or with their bodies, and have been obedient to the laws, should receive eulogies. This will be very fitting.
Quite true.
But it is not safe to honor with hymns and panegyrics those who are still alive. A person should complete their course and make a fair ending, and then we will praise them. And let praise be given equally to women as well as men who have been distinguished in virtue. The order of songs and dances shall be as follows. There are many ancient musical compositions and dances that are excellent, and from these the newly founded city may freely select what is proper and suitable. They shall choose judges who are at least 50 years old to make the selection, and any of the old poems that they consider sufficient shall be included. Any that are deficient or completely unsuitable shall either be discarded completely or examined and amended with the help of poets and musicians, using their poetic genius. But they shall explain to them the wishes of the legislators so that they may regulate dancing, music, and all choral strains according to the mind of the judges. They shall not be allowed to indulge, except in a few matters, their individual pleasures and fancies. Now, the irregular strain of music is always greatly improved by attaining to law and order, and rejecting the sweet muse, not that we mean to completely exclude pleasure, which is the characteristic of all music. And if a person is brought up from childhood to adulthood in the use of orderly and severe music, when they hear the opposite, they detest it and call it illiberal. But if they are trained in sweet and vulgar music, they consider the severer kind cold and displeasing. So, as I said before, while the person who hears them gains no more pleasure from one than from the other, one has the advantage of making those who are trained in better people, whereas the other makes them worse.
Very true.
Furthermore, we must distinguish and determine on some general principle what songs are suitable for women and what for men, and we must assign to them their proper melodies and rhythms. It is shocking for a whole harmony to be inharmonious, or for a rhythm to be unrhythmic, and this will happen when the melody is inappropriate to them. Therefore, the legislator must assign their forms to these as well. Now both sexes have melodies and rhythms that necessarily belong to them, and those of women are clearly indicated by their natural difference. The grand and courageous may be called manly, but that which inclines towards moderation and temperance may be declared, both in law and in ordinary speech, to be the more womanly quality. This, then, will be their general order. Let us now speak about the manner of teaching and imparting them, and the people to whom, and the time when, they are to be imparted. Just as the shipwright first lays down the lines of the keel and thus, as it were, draws the ship in outline, so do I seek to distinguish the patterns of life and lay down their keels according to the nature of different people's souls, truly seeking to consider the means and ways by which we may go through the voyage of life best. Nowadays, human affairs are hardly worth considering seriously, and yet we must take them seriously due to unfortunate circumstances. And having reached this point, it will be fitting for us to complete the matter, if only we can find a suitable method of doing so. But what do I mean? Someone may ask this very question, and quite rightly so.
Certainly.
I mean that when it comes to serious matters, a person should be serious, and when it comes to matters that are not serious, they should not be serious. God is the natural and worthy object of our most serious and blessed endeavors. As I mentioned before, humans are made to be playthings of God, and this, when truly considered, is the best part of them. Therefore, every man and woman should live seriously and spend their lives engaged in noble pastimes, having a different mindset from what they currently have.
In what way?
Currently, they believe that their serious pursuits should be for the sake of their leisure activities. They consider war to be a serious pursuit, which must be managed well for the sake of peace. But the truth is that there is neither amusement nor instruction of any significant degree in war, which we nevertheless consider to be the most serious of our pursuits. Therefore, as I said, each of us should live a peaceful life for as long and as well as possible. And what is the right way to live? Should we always live in leisure activities? If so, what kind of leisure activities? We should live by sacrificing, singing, and dancing, and then a person will be able to appease the gods and defend themselves against their enemies, conquering them in battle. The type of song or dance by which they will appease the gods has been described, and the paths along which they are to proceed have been laid out for them. They will move forward in the spirit of the poet, Telemachus. Some things you will find in your heart, but other things God will suggest, for I believe that you were not born or brought up without the will of the gods. And this should be the view of our students. They should think that what has been said is enough for them, and that any other things their genius and God will suggest to them, he will tell them to whom, and when, and to what gods they are to sacrifice and perform dances, and how they may appease the deities and live according to the natural order of things. They are mostly puppets, but with a small share of reality.
You have a low opinion of mankind, stranger.
No, McGillis, do not be amazed, but forgive me. I was comparing them with the gods, and I spoke under that impression. Let us grant, if you wish, that humans is not to be despised, but is worthy of some consideration. Next, we should establish buildings for gymnasiums and schools that are open to all. These should be in 3 places in the city. Outside the city and in the surrounding countryside, there should also be schools for horse riding and large grounds designed for archery and other forms of missile throwing, where young men can learn and practice. We have already mentioned these, and if the mention is not clear enough, let us further discuss them and incorporate them into laws. In these schools, there should be residences for teachers who will be brought from foreign lands and paid to teach the art of war and the art of music to those who attend the schools. The children should attend not only if their parents agree, but also if their parents do not agree. There should be compulsory education for everyone, as far as possible, and the students should be considered as belonging to the state rather than to their parents. My law would apply to females as well as males. They should both participate in the same exercises. I assert without fear of contradiction that gymnastics and horsemanship are as suitable for women as they are for men. I am convinced of this from ancient tradition, and there are said to be countless myriads of women in the vicinity of the Black Sea, called Soromatides, who not only ride horses like men but are also required to use bows and other weapons just like men. And I further affirm that if these things are possible, nothing can be more absurd than the practice in our own country, where people do not pursue the same activities with all their strength and with one mind. This reduces the state to a half instead of being a whole, but the state still has the same taxes to pay and the same hardships to endure. What could be a greater mistake for any legislator to make than this?
Very true. Yet much of what we have asserted, stranger, goes against the customs of states. Still, when you said that the discussion should be allowed to proceed and that we should choose what seems best after the discussion is completed, you spoke very appropriately, and I now feel remorse for what I have said. Tell me, then, what you would like to say next.
Cleinias, as I said before, I would like to say that if the possibility of these things were not sufficiently proven, then there might be an objection to the argument. But since the fact is as I have stated, anyone who rejects the law must find some other reason to object. And if they fail to do so, our recommendation still stands, and no one can deny that women should share in education and other aspects of life with men as much as possible. Consider this: if women do not fully participate in the lives of men, then they must have some other way of living.
Certainly.
And what kind of life would be preferable to the community we are assigning to them? Should we prefer the way of life adopted by the Thracians and many other races, where women work the land and tend to herd in flocks, serving their husbands like slaves? Or should we do as we do in our part of the world, where we gather all our belongings into one home and entrust them to our women, who manage them and oversee weaving and spinning? Or should we take a middle path, like in Lacedaemon, McGillis? Let the girls participate in physical education and music, while the adult women, no longer involved in spinning wool, work hard at weaving the fabric of life. This would be a significant and important task, along with their duties of serving and taking care of the household and raising children. They would not participate in the toils of war. If there were a need for them to fight for their city and families, unlike the Amazons, they would be unable to use archery or any other skilled missile weapons. They could not carry shields or spears like the goddess, nor could they bravely defend their country and strike fear into their enemies by standing in formation. Living as they do, they would never dare to imitate the Soromatides, who would appear to be like men compared to ordinary women. Let those who wish to praise your legislators, but I must speak my mind. The legislator should be complete and whole, not just half a man. He should not allow the female sex to live luxuriously and waste money without any order in their lives, while he takes the utmost care of the male sex, leaving only half of life blessed with happiness when he could have made the entire state happy.
What should we do, Cleinias? Should we allow a stranger to criticize Sparta in this way?
Yes, since we have given him the freedom to speak, we must let him continue until we have perfected our legislation.
Very true.
May I continue now?
By all means.
What will be the way of life for men who have their food and clothing provided for them in moderation, and who have entrusted the practice of the arts to others, and whose farming, managed by slaves who pay a portion of the produce, brings them enough for a temperate life? They have communal dining halls where the men sit separately, and nearby are the common tables for their families, daughters, and mothers. Every day, male and female officers inspect these tables and ensure proper behavior before dismissing them. Afterward, the presiding magistrate and his attendants honor the gods to whom the day and night are dedicated with libations, and then go home. For men, whose lives are ordered in this way, is there no work left to be done that is necessary and fitting? Should each one of them live like a fattened beast? Such a life is neither just nor honorable, and the one who lives it cannot escape his due punishment. The idle, fattened beast deserves to be torn apart by a valiant beast whose fatness has been worn down by brave deeds and hard work. These regulations, if we consider them carefully, cannot be fully implemented under current circumstances, or if women, children, houses, and all other things are privately owned. But if we can achieve the second best form of government, we will be in a good position. And for men living under this second form of government, there remains a great and significant task, ordained by righteous law. The life that deeply concerns the virtue of body and soul is twice, or even more than twice, as full of toil and trouble as the pursuit of victories in the Pythian and Olympic games, which prevent a man from engaging in any other occupation. There should be no other work interfering with the greater work of providing necessary exercise and nourishment for the body, and instruction and education for the soul. Night and day are not long enough to achieve perfection and completion in these areas. Therefore, all freemen should plan how they will spend their time throughout the day, from morning until evening and from evening until the next sunrise. It may seem improper for the legislator to determine the countless details of household management, including the duty of wakefulness in those who are to be perpetual watchmen of the entire city. It should be considered base and unworthy of a freeman for any citizen to sleep through an entire night instead of being the first to wake up and be seen by all his servants. Similarly, the mistress of the house should awaken her handmaidens instead of being awakened by them. This is what the male and female slaves, as well as the serving boys, and if possible, everyone and everything in the house, should regard as base. If they wake up early, they can accomplish a lot of their public and household tasks, such as city officials in the city and masters and mistresses in their own homes, before the sun rises. Nature does not require much sleep, whether for our souls, bodies, or the actions we perform. For someone who is asleep is of no use, just like if they were dead. The person among us who values life and reason the most stays awake as long as they can, only setting aside enough time for sleep that is necessary for good health. Much sleep is not necessary if one has developed the habit of moderation. Magistrates in states who stay awake at night are formidable to the wicked, whether they be enemies or citizens, and are respected and revered by the just and temperate, and are beneficial to themselves and the entire state. A night spent in this manner, in addition to all the advantages mentioned above, instills a certain courage in the minds of the citizens. When day breaks, it is time for the youth to go to their schoolmasters. Now, neither sheep nor any other animals can live without a shepherd, nor can children be left without tutors, or slaves without masters. And of all animals, the boy is the most unruly, as he has reason within him that has not yet been regulated. He is the most cunning, sharp-witted, and disobedient of animals. Therefore, he must be restrained with many reins. First, when he separates from his mother and nurses, he must be under the guidance of tutors due to his immaturity and foolishness. Then, as a free person, he must be controlled by teachers, no matter what they teach, and by studies. But he is also a slave, and in that regard, any free person who encounters him may punish him, as well as his tutor and instructor, if any of them do something wrong. And the person who encounters him and does not inflict the punishment he deserves will face great disgrace. Let the guardian of the law, who is responsible for education, oversee those who fail to punish the offenses we have mentioned when they should or who punish them inappropriately. Let them be vigilant and take special care of the training of our children, guiding their natures and always directing them towards what is good according to the law. But how can our law adequately train the director of education themselves? So far, everything has been imperfect, and nothing has been said that is clear or satisfactory. Now, as much as possible, the law should not leave anything to the director of education, but should explain everything so that they can be an interpreter and tutor to others. I have already spoken about dances, music, and choral strains, both in terms of their selection and how they should be improved and consecrated. However, I have not yet spoken, O illustrious guardian of education, about how your students should use those strains that are written in prose, although you have been informed about the martial strains they are to learn and practice. This includes what pertains to the learning of letters, the lyre, calculation, and any other things necessary for war, the management of households and cities, and what is useful in understanding the movements of the heavenly bodies, the stars, sun, moon, and the various regulations concerning these matters that are necessary for the entire state. I am referring to the arrangements of days and months and years that must be observed so that seasons, sacrifices, and festivals can occur in their regular and natural order, keeping the city alive and awake, with the gods receiving the honors they are due and people having a better understanding of them. All these things, O my friend, have not yet been sufficiently explained to you by the legislator. Therefore, pay attention to what I am about to say now. We were telling you, first, that you were not adequately informed about letters, and the objection was that you were never told whether a respectable citizen should dedicate themselves to that kind of learning in detail or not at all. The same applies to the study of the lyre. But now we say that they should pay attention to both. A fair amount of time for a 10-year-old to spend on letters is 3 years. The age of 13 is the appropriate time for them to start learning the lyre, and they may continue for another 3 years, neither more nor less. Regardless of whether their father or they themselves like or dislike the study, they should not be allowed to spend more or less time learning music than the law permits. And those who disobey the law should be deprived of the honors of youth, which we will discuss later. However, first, listen to what the young should learn in the early years of life and what their instructors should teach them. They should focus on learning letters until they can read and write. But if nature has not motivated them to acquire perfect beauty or speed in writing within the given number of years, they should leave it be. As for learning compositions that are not set to the lyre, whether they are metrical or without rhythmic divisions, prose compositions as they are called, which lack rhythm or harmony, considering how dangerous the writings of many authors in this category are that have been passed down to us, what will you do with them, O excellent guardians of the law? How can the lawgiver properly guide you in this matter? I believe they will face great difficulty.
What is troubling you, stranger? And why do you seem so confused in your mind?
You ask a natural question, Cleinias, and as my partners in the task of legislation, I must share both the difficult and easier parts of our work with you and McGillis.
What specifically are you referring to?
I will explain. It is challenging to go against the opinions of many people.
Well, haven't we already opposed popular opinion in many important laws?
That is true. And you are suggesting that the path we are taking may be disagreeable to some, but agreeable to others, or at least to people of equal importance. You are urging me to continue along this legislative path, regardless of the risks, and to remain optimistic and not lose heart.
Certainly.
And I am not losing heart. In fact, we have many poets who write in various meters, some serious, others aiming to entertain. All of humanity agrees that properly educated youth should be immersed in poetry. Some argue that they should constantly hear poetry being read aloud and always be learning it, even memorizing entire poems. Others select choice passages and long speeches, creating summaries of them, claiming that these should be memorized for a person to gain wisdom and experience from learning many things. And now you want me to clearly tell them what they are right and wrong about.
Yes, I do.
But how can I summarize all of them in one word? I believe, and there is a general consensus, that each of these poets has said many things well and many things poorly. And if that is true, then I affirm that too much learning is dangerous for young people.
How do you suggest the guardian of the law should act?
In what way?
I mean, what should be their guide in allowing young people to learn certain things and forbidding them from learning others? Please do not hesitate to answer.
My dear Cleinias, I am fortunate in this matter.
How so?
I have a pattern to follow. When I consider the words we have spoken from early morning until now, which I believe have been inspired by heaven, they seem to me to be like a poem. When I reflect on all our words, I feel a sense of pleasure. Of all the discourses I have ever learned or heard, whether in poetry or prose, this seems to me to be the most just and suitable for young people to hear. I cannot imagine a better guide for the guardian of the law, who is also the director of education. They cannot do better than advise teachers to teach young people these words, and any others of a similar nature that they may find in poetry or prose. If they come across unwritten discourses like ours, they should certainly preserve them and write them down. First and foremost, they should require the teachers themselves to learn and approve of these words. Any teachers who refuse should not be employed, but those who agree with this judgment should be used and entrusted with the instruction and education of youth. And with this, let my imaginative tale about letters and teachers of letters come to an end.
Stranger, I do not think we have strayed from the intended scope of the argument. But whether we are right or not in our overall conception, I cannot be certain.
The truth, Cleinias, will become clearer when we reach the end of our discussion about laws, as we have often said.
Yes.
Now that we have finished discussing the teacher of letters, it is time to give instructions to the teacher of the lyre.
Certainly.
I believe that if we recall our previous discussions, we will be able to provide suitable regulations for this part of instruction and education to the teachers of the lyre.
What are you referring to?
I recall us saying that the 60-year-old choristers of Dionysus should have exceptional perception of rhythm and musical composition. This will enable them to distinguish between good and bad imitation, that is, the imitation of a good or bad soul under the influence of passion. They should reject the bad imitation and display the good imitation in hymns and songs, captivating the souls of young people and inviting them to follow and attain virtue through imitation.
That is true.
With this goal in mind, the teacher and the learner should use the sounds of the lyre, as its notes are pure. The teacher plays a note, and the student repeats it in unison. However, complexity and variation of notes, when the strings produce one sound and the poet or composer creates another, or when they create harmonies and melodies that combine different intervals, tempos, or pitches, or when they create intricate variations of rhythms that are adapted to the notes of the lyre, all of these things are not suitable for those who need to quickly and effectively learn music in 3 years. Opposing principles create confusion and make learning difficult. Our young people should learn quickly, and the knowledge they need to acquire is not insignificant, as we will soon see. Let the director of education focus on the principles of music that we are establishing. As for the songs and lyrics that the chorus masters will teach, we have already described them. They are the same ones that we said would benefit cities by providing innocent entertainment when they are consecrated and adapted for different festivals.
That is true.
Then let the person elected as the director of music receive these rules from us as the absolute truth. May they succeed in their role. Now, let us move on to establish additional rules about dancing and general physical exercise. After discussing the teaching of music, let us do the same for gymnastics. Children should learn to dance and engage in physical exercises, shouldn't they?
Yes.
Then boys should have dance instructors, and girls should have dance mistresses to train them.
Very good.
Let us once again summon the person who is primarily responsible for this task, the superintendent of youth, i.e., the director of education. They will have plenty to do if they oversee both music and gymnastics.
But how can an old man handle such great responsibilities?
My friend, there will be no difficulty, as the law has already given and will continue to give them permission to choose any citizens, male or female, as their assistants in this role. They will know whom they should choose and will be careful not to make any mistakes, understanding the importance of their position and the responsibility that comes with it. They will also consider that if young men have been and continue to be well educated, then everything will go smoothly. However, if not, we do not want to speculate on what will happen, as it may cause concern for the future of our state. We have already discussed dancing and general physical exercises in detail. This includes all military exercises such as archery, weapon throwing, the use of light shields, fighting with heavy weapons, military formations, army movements, encampments, and everything related to horsemanship. There should be public instructors for all these activities, paid by the state, and their students should include men, boys, girls, and women who should all be knowledgeable in these areas. Girls should practice dancing with weapons and learn the art of combat from a young age. As they grow up, they should focus on formations, tactics, and the proper handling of weapons. This is important in case the entire military force needs to leave the city and engage in warfare elsewhere. The women who are left behind to protect the young and the rest of the city should be capable of doing so. On the other hand, if enemies, whether barbarians or Greeks, attack the city with great force and force them to fight for its possession, which is not impossible, it would be a great disgrace for the state if the women have been so poorly trained that they cannot fight for their children, like birds would, against any strong opponent. Instead, they would immediately rush to the temples and crowd around the altars and shrines, bringing shame upon human nature and proving that humans are the most cowardly of all animals.
Such a lack of education, stranger, is certainly unbecoming for a state and a great misfortune.
What if we extend our law to say that women should not neglect military matters and that all citizens, both male and female, should pay attention to them?
I completely agree.
We have partially discussed wrestling, but there is an important aspect that we have not yet addressed and cannot easily explain without demonstrating it through both words and actions. When word and action combine, we will be able to clearly explain what we mean. We will show that wrestling is most closely related to the military art and should be pursued for that purpose, rather than wrestling being the focus.
Excellent.
That is enough about wrestling. Now, let us move on to discuss other movements of the body. These movements can be referred to as dancing and can be divided into two types, one that imitates noble figures and represents honorable actions, and another that imitates ignoble figures and represents mean actions. Both types have further subdivisions. The serious type includes those engaged in war and intense action. It is the exercise of a noble person with a courageous heart. The other type represents a temperate soul enjoying prosperity and modest pleasures. It can truly be called the dance of peace. The warrior dance is different from the peaceful one and can be aptly called Pyrrhic. It imitates the movements used to avoid blows and projectiles by dropping, giving way, springing aside, rising, or falling. It also imitates the actions of archery, javelin throwing, and various types of strikes. When the imitation is of brave bodies and souls, and the movements are direct and muscular, giving a straight movement to the body's limbs, that is the true type of dance. The opposite is not correct. In the dance of peace, what we need to consider is whether a person carries themselves naturally and gracefully in accordance with societal norms. However, before we proceed, we must distinguish between the types of dancing that are in question. Which type is uncertain, and how can we differentiate between the two? There are dances of a backsheet nature, both those that imitate drunken individuals and those named after nymphs, Pan, Silenuses, and satyrs. There are also dances that involve purification or the celebration of mysteries. These types of dancing cannot be accurately defined as either peaceful or warlike, and in fact, they may not have any meaning at all. They can be best described as distinct from both warlike and peaceful dances and are not suitable for a city. Let us leave them aside for now and focus on the dances of war and peace, as these are the ones we are deeply concerned with. The peaceful muse, which honors the gods and their offspring through dance, is strongly associated with a sense of prosperity. This category can be further divided into two subcategories. The first expresses the joy of escaping labor or danger and experiencing greater pleasures. The second expresses the preservation and increase of existing goods, with less exciting pleasure. In all these cases, a person moves their body more when the pleasure is greater, and less when the pleasure is lesser. Additionally, if a person is more disciplined and has learned courage through training, their movements are more restrained. On the other hand, if a person is a coward and lacks self-control, their movements are more exaggerated and violent. When speaking or singing, a person is unable to keep their body completely still. Thus, the art of dancing has emerged from the imitation of words through gestures. Within these various forms of imitation, some individuals move in an orderly manner, while others move in a disorderly manner. The ancients were given many names that are in accordance with nature and deserving of praise. One excellent name they have given to dances performed by individuals who are moderate in their pleasures during times of prosperity is Emiliae, or dances of order. This establishes two types of noble dances, the Pyrrhic dance for war and the Emilia dance for peace. These names are appropriate and fitting. The legislator should provide a general outline of these concepts, and the guardian of the law should investigate and understand them. Dancing should be combined with music, and each sacrificial feast should be assigned the appropriate dance. Once everything has been consecrated in the correct order, no changes should be made to the dances or songs. From then on, the city and its citizens will continue to experience the same pleasures, striving to be as similar as possible to one another, and living well and happily. I have described the dances that are suitable for noble bodies and generous souls. However, it is also necessary to consider and understand unattractive individuals and thoughts, as well as those intended to produce laughter in comedy. These comedic elements can be found in the style, song, and dance of comedic performances. Serious matters cannot be understood without comedic elements, nor can opposites be comprehended without their counterparts. To have true understanding, a person must be familiar with both. However, they should not engage in them personally, as they may unknowingly say or do something ridiculous and out of place. Instead, they should command slaves and hire individuals to imitate such things. There should always be an element of novelty in these imitations. These regulations should be established in both law and discourse as the guidelines for comedic amusements, commonly known as comedy. If any of the serious poets, known as tragedians, come to our city and ask, "O strangers, may we come to your city and country? Can we bring our poetry with us?" What is your stance on these matters? How should we respond to these divine individuals? I believe our answer should be as follows: best of strangers, we are also tragic poets to the best of our abilities. Our tragedy is the best and noblest, as our entire state is an imitation of the best and noblest life, which we believe to be the true essence of tragedy. You are poets, and we are poets. We both create the same kind of art, competing and opposing each other in the noblest of dramas, which can only be perfected by true law, as we hope. Therefore, do not assume that we will immediately allow you to set up your stage in the public square, or let the voices of your actors drown out our own, or permit you to address our women, children, and common people about our institutions using language different from our own, and often contrary to our own. It would be madness for a state to grant you such freedom without first determining whether your poetry can be recited and is suitable for publication. Therefore, O sons and descendants of the softer muses, first show your songs to the magistrates and let them compare them with our own. If your songs are the same or better, we will provide you with a chorus. But if not, my friends, we cannot. Let these, then, be the customs established by law regarding all dances and their instruction, and let matters concerning slaves be distinguished from those concerning masters, if you do not object.
We have no hesitation in agreeing when you present the matter in this way.
There are still 3 studies suitable for free men. Arithmetic is one of them, the measurement of length, area, and volume is the second, and the third deals with the movements of the stars in relation to each other. Not everyone needs to delve into these subjects in a strictly scientific manner, but only a few, and we will indicate who they are later at the appropriate time. It is disgraceful for anyone to be ignorant of what is necessary for humanity in general and what is true. However, delving deeply into these matters is not easy or possible for everyone. But there is something necessary and unavoidable about them. The person who originally coined the proverb about God had this in mind when he said that not even God himself can fight against necessity. He was referring to divine necessity. As for the human necessities that many people speak of in this way, nothing could be more ridiculous than such an application of the words.
And what knowledge necessities are there, stranger, which are divine and not human?
I consider them to be those without which a person cannot be a god, demigod, or hero to humanity, or be capable of serious thought or responsibility. It would be very ungodlike for someone to be unable to count to 1, 2, 3, or to distinguish between odd and even numbers, or to be unable to count at all, or to reckon day and night, or to be completely unfamiliar with the movements of the sun, moon, and other stars. It would be foolish to think that all of these are not necessary aspects of knowledge for someone who intends to know anything about the highest forms of knowledge. However, which aspects of knowledge these are, how many there are, when they should be learned, what should be learned together and what separately, and the entire interrelation of these aspects must be understood correctly first. With these aspects leading the way, we can then proceed to other areas of knowledge. This is because necessity, grounded in nature, compels us, and against this necessity, we say that not even a God contends, nor ever will.
I believe, stranger, that what you have just said is absolutely true and in accordance with nature.
Yes, Cleinias, that is the case. However, it is difficult for the legislator to begin with these studies. We will make regulations for them at a more suitable time.
Stranger, you are afraid of our habitual ignorance of the subject. There is no reason that should prevent you from speaking openly.
I am certainly afraid of the difficulties you mentioned, but I am even more afraid of those who engage in this kind of knowledge and do so poorly. Complete ignorance is not such a terrible or extreme evil, and it is far from being the greatest of all. Too much cleverness and learning, accompanied by a poor upbringing, are much more destructive.
True.
I believe that all free men should learn as much of these branches of knowledge as every child in Egypt is taught when they learn the alphabet. In that country, arithmetical games have been invented for the use of young children, which they learn as a source of pleasure and amusement. They must distribute apples and garlands, using the same number for different numbers of people at times, and they arrange boxers and wrestlers as they pair up by chance or remain unmatched, showing how their turns come in a natural order. Another way they entertain them is by distributing vessels, sometimes made of gold, brass, silver, and other metals mixed, and sometimes made of only one metal. As I was saying, they adapt the numbers commonly used to their amusement, and in this way, they make the arrangements and movements of armies and expeditions more understandable to their students. They also make people more useful to themselves and more alert in managing a household. Furthermore, in measuring things that have length, area, and volume, they free us from the natural ignorance of all these things, which is so ridiculous and disgraceful.
What kind of ignorance do you mean?
Oh, my dear Cleinias, I, like you, have recently been amazed to learn of our ignorance in these matters. To me, we seem more like animals than humans, and I am quite ashamed, not only of myself, but of all Greeks.
About what? Please, stranger, explain what you mean.
I will, or rather, I will illustrate my meaning with a question, and please answer me. You know, I assume, what length is.
Certainly.
And what breadth is.
Of course.
And you know that these are two distinct things, and that there is a third thing called depth?
Yes, of course.
And don't all these seem to you to be measurable in relation to themselves?
Yes.
That is to say, length is naturally measurable with length, breadth with breadth, and depth in the same way with depth?
Undoubtedly.
But if some things are measurable and others completely immeasurable, and you believe that all things are measurable, what is your position regarding them?
Clearly, far from good.
Concerning length and breadth when compared to depth, or breadth and length when compared to each other, don't all Greeks agree that these are measurable in some way?
Absolutely true.
But if these quantities are completely incomparable, and yet we all consider them comparable, should we not be ashamed of our fellow citizens? Could we not say to them, "O you best of Greeks, is this not one of the things we said was disgraceful not to know, and that having only a basic understanding of is not a great distinction?"
Certainly.
And there are other similar things, where other errors of the same kind arise.
What are they?
The nature of comparable and incomparable quantities in relation to each other. A capable person should be able to distinguish them when they think, and different people should compete by asking questions, which would be a much better and more elegant way to spend their time than playing checkers.
I agree, these pastimes are not so different from playing checkers.
And these, Cleinias, are the subjects that our young people should learn, because they are harmless and not difficult. Learning them will be enjoyable, and they will benefit the state. If anyone disagrees, let them speak up.
Certainly.
So if these subjects are as we claim, we will include them. If not, they will be excluded.
Definitely. But can we now, stranger, establish these subjects as necessary and fill the gaps in our laws?
They will be considered as commitments that can be revised and removed from our state in the future if they do not please us who propose them, or you who accept them.
A fair condition.
Next, let us consider whether we are willing to propose the study of astronomy for our young people.
Go ahead.
Here is a strange phenomenon that cannot be tolerated in any way.
What are you referring to?
People say that we should not inquire into the supreme God and the nature of the universe, or busy ourselves with searching for the causes of things, and that such inquiries are impious. But the opposite is true.
What do you mean?
What I am saying may seem paradoxical and contrary to the usual beliefs of older people. But when someone has a good and true idea that is advantageous to the state and pleasing to God in every way, they cannot refrain from expressing it.
Your words are reasonable enough, but will we find any good or true ideas about the stars?
My good friends, at this time all of us Greeks are lying, if I may use that term, about those great gods, the sun and the moon.
What lies?
We say that they, along with other stars, do not follow the same path, and we call them planets or wanderers.
Very true, stranger. In my life, I have often seen the morning star, the evening star, and others not moving in their usual course, but wandering off their path in various ways. I have also seen the sun and moon doing what we all know they do.
Exactly, Megillus and Cleinias. I believe that our citizens and young people should learn about the nature of the gods in the heavens, enough to be able to offer sacrifices and pray to them in a respectful manner, and not to blaspheme about them.
You are right if such knowledge is attainable. If we are wrong in our current way of speaking and can be better instructed to use better language, then I agree with you that we should acquire enough knowledge to speak correctly. Now, please try to explain your entire meaning to us, and we will do our best to understand you.
There is some difficulty in understanding my meaning, but it is not very great, and it will not take much time. I am proof of this myself, for I did not know these things a long time ago, not even in my youth. Yet I can explain them to you in a short amount of time. If they were difficult, I could never have explained them all, even at my age, to old men like yourselves.
That's true. But what is this study that you describe as wonderful and suitable for young people to learn, but of which we are ignorant? Please try to explain its nature as clearly as you can.
I will. My good friends, that other belief about the wandering of the sun, moon, and other stars is not true, but the opposite of the truth. Each of them moves in the same path, not in many paths, but in one circular path, and the variations are only apparent. We are also wrong in thinking that the fastest one is the slowest, or vice versa. And if what I say is true, just imagine if we had a similar belief about horses running at the Olympic Games, or about men running in a race, and we called the fastest one the slowest and the slowest one the fastest, and praised the loser as if they were the winner. In that case, our praises would not be true or very pleasing to the runners, even though they are only human. And now, to make the same mistake about the gods, which would have been ridiculous and erroneous in the case of humans, is it not ridiculous and erroneous?
I would say it is worse than ridiculous.
In any case, the gods would not approve of us spreading false rumors about them.
That is true, if it is indeed the case.
And if we can prove that it is indeed the case, then we should learn all these matters necessary to avoid impiety. But if we cannot, then we can leave them alone and make that our decision.
Very well.
Enough about laws concerning education and learning. Now let us turn our attention to hunting and similar activities. The legislator has a duty that goes beyond just making laws. There is something beyond the law that lies between advice and law, and we have come across it several times in our discussions. For example, in the education of incredibly young children, there are things that cannot be defined, and it is absurd to consider them matters of positive law. Now that we have outlined our laws and the entire constitution of our state, it is not enough to praise a virtuous citizen as someone who serves and obeys the laws the best. The highest form of praise is for a citizen who lives a pure life and obeys the words of the legislator, both when giving laws and when assigning praise and blame. This is the truest praise that can be given to a citizen, and the true legislator should not only write laws but also include honorable and dishonorable things within them. The perfect citizen should seek to strengthen these principles as well as the principles of law that are enforced by punishments. Let me provide an example to clarify my meaning and support my words. Hunting is a broad activity that encompasses many things. There is hunting of creatures in water and in the air, as well as hunting of land animals of all kinds, not just wild beasts. Hunting humans is also worth considering, both in war and in the context of friendship, which can be praised or blamed. There is also thieving, and the hunting practiced by robbers, as well as the hunting of armies against armies. When legislating about hunting, the legislator cannot ignore these things, nor can they create threatening ordinances that assign rules and penalties for all of them. What should they do? They should praise and blame hunting with a view to the exercise and pursuits of youth. And on the other hand, the young person must listen obediently, not letting pleasure or pain hinder them. They should consider the praises and instructions of the legislator as their standard of action, rather than the punishments imposed by law. With this in mind, we can proceed to moderately praise and criticize hunting. Praise should be given to the kind of hunting that improves the souls of young men, while censure should be given to the kind that has the opposite effect. Now let us address young men in the form of a prayer for their well-being. O friends, may you never be possessed by a desire or love for hunting in the sea, or for angling or catching creatures in the water, whether awake or asleep, using hooks or lazy contraptions like wheels. May the desire to catch men and engage in piracy by sea never enter your souls and make you cruel and lawless hunters. And may the desire to steal in town or country never enter your passing thoughts. May the insidious fancy of catching birds, which is hardly worthy of freemen, never enter the minds of any youth. Therefore, for our athletes, the only hunting and catching allowed is that of land animals. One kind is called night hunting, where the hunters take turns sleeping and are lazy. This should not be commended, just like hunting with intervals of rest, where the wild strength of animals is subdued by nets and snares, rather than the victory of a determined spirit. Thus, only the best kind of hunting is allowed, that of quadrupeds, which is done with horses, dogs, and the hunter's own bodies. They overcome the animals by chasing them, striking them, and capturing them with their own hands, those who care about noble adulthood. The praise and blame for all these things have now been declared, and the law shall be as follows: let no one hinder those who are truly sacred hunters from pursuing the chase wherever and however they want. However, the night hunter who relies on nets and traps shall not be allowed to hunt anywhere. Fowler in the mountains and uninhabited areas shall be permitted, but not on cultivated land or consecrated wilderness, and anyone who encounters them may stop them. As for the hunter in water, they may hunt anywhere except in harbors, sacred streams, marshes, or pools, if they do not pollute the water with poisonous substances. And now we can say that all our laws regarding education are complete.
Very good.